Hello. Thanks for joining today's session. All right. My name is Mike Laraya, Senior Vice President, Global Services for Imagine Communications. Today, I'm joined by Greg Weitz, who's our Senior Director of Customer Care and Imagine Advisory Services. What we're going to talk about today is a service that we offer that we think is important to our customers, ourselves, and in pretty much any business in general, but of course we want to focus on our very valued customers. It's our business continuity check. So our advisory services group that Greg runs has developed a suite of offerings to inspect, analyze, and recommend findings for our customer around the subject of business continuity. The service addresses the needs for continuous, uninterrupted business operations in the face of unexpected disruptions. Greg, I understand you have a pretty good framework for conducting these inspections. Can you tell us a little bit about the framework?
Well, thanks, Mike. Yes, we have a well-structured methodology for analyzing business continuity capabilities. It's actually an 8-point plan that we put into 3 different task areas. And this includes business operations, technology operations, and communications.
Do we find that most customers need kind of all of these? Are they particularly vulnerable in any area, or is it kind of general across all of these?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. I think most companies have some elements of these continuity plans, but frankly, not very many have all of the pieces. So we think we can add value by doing a comprehensive review. And even if somebody thinks they have a good communication plan, for example, we can drill into that, and perhaps there's some things that they overlooked. And just through the dialogue and discussion, that can help them improve their communication plan.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's what we found when we looked at our plans ourselves. We're good in some areas, needed some development in other areas.
Absolutely. And, even something as basic as checking current phone numbers, current contact information, make sure the emails are right, the office phones are right, the mobile phones, the home phones, all of that. I mean, it's kind of basic, but boy, when you have a disruptive event, like a hurricane or an earthquake, other natural disasters or economic disasters, having those in place is really key. So why don't I outline the overall approach? As I said, we break this down into 8 steps. The first one is to assess the business continuity plans. What we do there, as I said, we look at the 3 areas: business, technology, and communications, but we also look at the geodispersion of a particular company. In our industry, a lot of broadcasters in North America will have facilities on the East Coast and on the West Coast, and that absolutely comes into play when you're looking at business continuity. We also do an inspection of personnel plans, but it's important to understand who you have on your team, what their skills are, and have the capability to contact them and work with them through this disrupted period.
Greg, even people that would need a laptop in an emergency, you have to make sure that they actually have a laptop. Folks that wouldn't normally need one, but in an emergency, they do need one. Do they have the right connectivity methods if they have to work remote for a period of time?
Exactly. And again, in normal steady state operations, these are things that you might not think about because they don't seem critical. But all of your office workers who might have workstations where they routinely use business systems may not have laptops as well. So that if everyone has to evacuate a site and work from home, a company needs to make sure that those people are well equipped to do that. So if I just summarize that first step on the overall assessment, as I said, we look at business operations, technology, and by communications, I don't mean like networking communications. This is human communications, person to person. So I'll talk a little bit more about reviewing the personnel roster. It's important to develop a skills matrix and understand who your essential workers are, and understand who the backups are for each one of those functions or roles that you have. It's also important to make sure that all those essential people have the right kind of access to either the primary facility or a backup facility. Often the facilities themselves will be locked down or controlled, and not everyone will be let in. Sometimes there's special consideration there. So you have to make sure that all personnel have access to facilities if they need it, and also to all the systems. Okay, when examining a facility closure and an access policy, there are several things to look at, and this is really the heart of a business continuity plan. Management really needs to set recovery time objectives. How long can a business tolerate being down and unavailable? And again, in our industry, in the broadcast industry, we can reframe that question and say, how long can you be off air? If that's a second, a minute, 5 minutes, I mean, where do you draw the line? The number, it's not a big, it's not a lot of time if you're in this business. But it needs to be clear, and then the actual policies and practices will drive off what that objective is and influence how you position your technology and processes and procedures to be able to recover. There's a maximum tolerable downtime that you'll have certain recovery point objectives. For example, if a business system goes down, how long can I tolerate that if I can't, let's say, add playlists for programming or enter spots for advertising? How long can that be down? A day, perhaps? But that's different than the tolerable downtime for actual broadcast operations.
Greg, on some of these things from a recovery standpoint, it's also the method and the process by which you're going to recover as well, whether that's getting back on air, whether that's getting some data that might have been lost, or whether that's how you re-enter a facility that has to be closed. It's the recovery time, and then what's the process of recovery and the gates you have to go through to make a successful recovery, whether that's a technical recovery or an occupational recovery, correct? That's a couple things we look at.
That is correct. This is a little bit more elaborate than a lot of people think. But as you said, just as important as, well, how do I bring people back? And best practices in this area is to look at a kind of phased approach. That's usually what works best. You can bring people back in waves or stages from total evacuation to perhaps 25%, 50%, 75%, and then ultimately bringing everyone back.
And I would imagine that includes how you bring equipment that might be shut down, other types of systems, how you bring them back online is important, as you may have to shut them down, correct?
Absolutely. There's a sibling to a business continuity plan is a disaster recovery plan. And most companies do have disaster recovery or DR plans. And that's a critical element in a DR plan is how you can fail over from one location to another and then bring back systems to a particular location that might have had to have been shut down. It's almost like these various areas need to be orchestrated so that things do work together, that the business systems are up, that the broadcast operations are up, advertising systems are up, and so forth. And there's access is there, system availability, data availability. And one other point in our industry in particular, you also need to make sure that you have all of your media files backed up. The media has to be accessible. It's one thing to be able to recover, let's say, at a remote site and bring up your business systems, but you need to have that program material to be able to
Right.
broadcast, let's say, from the West Coast. We normally do it on the East Coast, and that's non-trivial. That requires a lot of thought, a lot of work, a lot of discipline and diligence to make sure that happens.
We're often surprised on the lack of a backup plan, whether it's sometimes areas of ourselves, our personal life, or certainly some of our customers. And the backup plan can be more involved than just the act of backing up. Is it on site? Is it remote? Is it through a third party? These are also things you'd look at depending on the nature of the individual's business and the requirements around that, whether you're a broadcaster or a facility that routes data or originates content, right? We take all of those things into consideration as well, correct?
That's right. But again, part of the benefit of doing one of these business continuity checks is to actually check the discipline of the procedures to make sure that even though it's written on paper, yes, I should do a weekly database backup and so forth, take it beyond what's written down as the procedure and actually go and validate that you do have data backups in place, that you do have other system images available if you need to recover servers, that you do have backup media, backup content available in the case of a disaster. We'll also look at other gaps that might be in place, whether that's equipment. Maybe you thought you had a lifeboat server, but that lifeboat server was put into production 6 months ago because you had one isolated emergency, but now you don't have the backup system. So you want to make sure that you have all the equipment, that you have the procedures, as you talked about, Mike, and that all the failover, rollover procedures, restore procedures are all in place.
When you're looking at checks like this, what are 2 or 3 things that somebody would overlook, even though they may think they have a good business continuity plan? What are a couple things that we find that folks usually just overlook?
Well, the first one is actually a big one, a revenue recovery plan. A lot of people are aware of and tuned into things like database backups, system availability, and so forth. But in the case of a disaster where your business is severely disrupted and can stop, that might and most likely will affect your cash flow, your revenue flow. And that needs to really be thought through on what the business is going to do about that. How long can the business be down and not operate? Can you operate in a constrained manner and still have cash flow? And this goes even one layer deeper, Mike, where you can evaluate your sources of revenue. How much of it is transactional? How much of it is predictable revenue that's contracted over time? That's important to understand. And actually, if you can plan for this and have some predictable revenue flow, that can help carry you through these periods. So revenue is probably the biggest one. And I think communications is probably another area that people don't always think about. And by communications, I'm not just talking about whether that's wireless communications or work from home broadband, but even just understanding all of the organization's hierarchies and communication needs. By the way, it's always good to do a dry run tests, simulate a disaster. Let's try to recover our data, and let's go through our phone tree and make sure we can contact all of our personnel.
Yeah, it's also about access too, communication and access. Do you have the proper access from the home office or remote to the servers, the tools, the ERP systems that you might need?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. As part of this, Greg, what do we deliver? What's the deliverable?
Well, the way that we typically structure one of these engagements is to try to do this within a week's time frame, if possible. We can either do it on site, or if that's not possible, we can do remote delivery of this using tools such as Zoom and having conference calls. Obviously, it's better if you can be on site to do it on site. And again, the way that inspections are structured is we will go on site and take a complete inventory. We'll make sure that we have all of the drawings and documentation, processes and procedures and so forth, gather all of the existing information, look for gaps, have workshop meetings with our customers, management team, review the material, again, just discuss possible gaps and ways to fill those. And then at the end of the week, we'll prepare a report that identifies all the things that we believe should be in place, and they get a green check. Yes, it's there. Or if there are some gaps, we'll flag that as either an amber or a red issue. And then finally, we'll give a summary of our recommendations on how to close some of those gaps.
I think maybe to wrap it up, what makes Imagine Advisory Services unique and able to provide our customers value in this area?
Well, Imagine Communications has a long history in the broadcast industry. We have been around and we have many customers worldwide. Our staff in general is very experienced and worked in cooperation and in partnership with our customers for a long time. Our customers in the broadcast industry know us and they trust us. I think we're well respected as one of the most knowledgeable companies in the industry. This is what we breathe and sleep every day. So we feel we have some unique insight in that area.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining today's session. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you found some things that were interesting and intriguing. For more information on our business continuity check and other Imagine Advisory Services, please check out our website. Thank you very much.